Today we are finally testing the electric G-Wagon and are going to find out how far it will go at 120 kilometers an hour or 75 miles an hour on the motorway on a full charge of battery. Will this turn out to be the least efficient EV ever tested? And also, how quiet is it at speed? Lastly, we'll also be testing the accuracy of the route planner to find out if it can be trusted. All of this and more will be answered in today's video. I couldn't have chosen a worse day to do this range test, but we have to do the test the days I have these cars. And today's conditions, especially in a car like this, which is probably the least efficient, least aerodynamic electric car on the market, having 12 degrees and rain and a headwind moving northward of 3 to 4 meters per second is just terrible. And that is reflected in the consumption, because after about 25 minutes on the road, our average consumption is an insane 42 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which just doesn't make any sense and is about twice as much as I've gotten in similar conditions out of a Skoda Enyaq coupe, which is insane. Like twice as much, going 120 kilometers an hour or 75 miles an hour on the motorway, which is just insane. Yeah, this car is insane in a lot of ways, and for a lot of markets it doesn't make a lot of sense. For Norway, it makes more sense than in other markets because we have so high taxes and tariffs and just added taxes, value-added taxes on internal combustion engine cars, especially high output and which have high performance and also weigh a lot, that this car actually in Norway makes sense. Because if you're going to go out and buy a G63 AMG in Norway, it's going to cost you like 325 to 375,000 euros or dollars. This car spec this way, which pretty much gives you the same performance as a G63, is about 200,000 euros or dollars. So that is quite a significant discount compared to the internal combustion engine version. And that's why this makes sense. But where this doesn't make sense is for long trips and going motorway speeds, because this consumption is just completely insane. And what's going to be interesting that we're also testing in this video is the accuracy of the route planner, which now is saying we're going to ride with 15% at our turnaround point. When we started it said 19. That's probably just going to tick down and down. Yeah. But other than that, this is a quiet and comfortable car, or relatively quiet. I'm going to reveal the noise test measurements at the end of the video, but like there's a lot of wind noise because of this is just being a box moving through the air. Yeah, but I like it. I love this car. It is insane. You sit high as you do in a bus. It's like a boat to drive, but at the same time it feels like a tank. It just has a sense of solidity like you're not going to find in any other car. It's just a unique piece of kit, the G580 with EQ technology, which from now on I'm just going to call the G580. The past, I'd say year or few years, I've talked a lot about how bad the advanced driver assistance systems are in basically all the Chinese cars. Like, they're bad at lane centering, they're bad at engaging, they get confused when you're passing trucks or big vehicles or on-ramps and exits, and just haven't been up to par with cars, for example, from Germany, like Audi or BMW, and even some of the best Volvo products. But I have to say that this car is from Germany, and the ADAS in this has not been the most reliable or confidence-inspiring. So maybe a few reasons for that. So first off, this is a body-on-frame SUV. This is not a unibody car like basically everything else I've driven on the channel and every other electric car. Like the only other electric car which is a body on frame I've driven is the Ford F-150 Lightning, and now this. And these cars, with their slow steering and high center of gravity and just the overall construction and the suspension architecture means that you're going to get a car that's not that precise and wanders, and this is very much that. So I think that in combination with this being a body on frame SUV And also, for some reason, this car is on two different tires. So the two front tires are Falcon Azensis and also the rear right, but the rear left is a Continental Eco Contact 6 tire. And I told Mercedes and they didn't get back to me for why. So yeah. Well, I just thought I should report on that, you know, fair to be fair. I'm not just going to complain on cars from China because they're from China. I like a lot of cars from China, especially their interiors. But this also, yeah, is not the best when it comes to the ADAS at all. Okay, so now we've exited the motorway, we've turned around, and now we're going to enter the on-ramp to go back to where we started. The car predicted we would arrive here with 43% stated charge. We arrived here with 45, and it's now predicting we'll arrive back at our start point with 14% battery, which, yeah, not sure if we're gonna ride with that. And also, average consumption, guys, has dropped a little bit, but we're still at 40 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is insane. But hopefully now we're gonna head back southward. We're gonna have a tailwind, and that's gonna help with the consumption somewhat. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers. We are now approaching our exit, and what we're going to do now before I reveal the results and also before we go through the noise test measurements also is to connect to a charger to see what kind of charge speed we get after a few hours on the road. You know, just passive heating of the battery, no preconditioning. We don't do that in this test. This test is all about getting that maximum efficiency, and that means not using energy to heat up the battery. And I'm pretty sure that maybe we would have needed a little bit energy to heat up the battery because it's just been between 12 and 13 degrees Celsius today. We do preconditioning and testing of that in another test called the long trip test, which will be my next video. But this test is all about getting, you know, that maximum efficiency and also the most range. So here we are, an hour and 45 minutes, which is like in a minute or two slower than usual. And that is due to there was roadworks on our way north and also on our way south, just briefly, but that will, you know, bring down our average speed. Okay, so we're now here at the charger, and we arrived here with 13% stated charge. The car predicted when we left here, we would arrive back here with 19, but when we left Muev, the car predicted 14% stated charge, so that is pretty accurate. Okay, so we've now connected the charger. As I said, it's here on the right side on the rear. And since we're down to 13% stated charge, I think we should see at least 150 kilowatts and maybe close to that 200 if the battery is warm enough. Okay, so the charge speed is now climbing, 12% stated charge, which is 1% less than what the display shows, which is kind of interesting. I've seen that in this car is that the charger shows a different stated charge than the car. Maybe something with the BMS, not entirely sure. Let's see, hitting 140, climbing slowly, 150 as predicted, maybe 160. So it's kind of nice to see that, you know, this car, without even preconditioning the battery, just driving on the motorway for a few hours, even when it's like cold, 12, 13 degrees Celsius outside, we're still gonna basically hit that peak charge speed. Before I reveal the results of our range test, I'm gonna go through the noise test measurements. So at each speed, at 80, 100, and 120 kilometers an hour, I do 3 measurements over 2 minutes each, sometimes even more. And I do it with proper equipment. I have my laptop here, I have a calibrated microphone and proper software, so we get a graph. So at 80 kilometers an hour, we had an average measurement of 61 decibels, which is the quietest we've ever had in any car, even quieter than the Polestar 3 long-range dual motor performance on studless winter tires, which is a very quiet compound. At 100 kilometers an hour, again 3 measurements with for an average of 64 decibels, which is also very, very quiet. And at 120 kilometers an hour, 3 measurements for an average of 67.5 decibels. And if we compare this to the Polestar 3, it is actually a lot more noisy, like 1.5 more decibels, though it was quieter at lower speeds. And that is because this car tire noise is so well insulated, but because this is a big box, you're gonna have a lot of wind noise, especially off the A and even the B pillars. Like when we had crosswinds, I could hear, you know, from the rear window. So this shape really isn't aerodynamic, and that's penalized when you're going fast, as these results show. Now for the results of the range test. So over this trip, going 120 kilometers an hour, we had an average consumption of 38.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and that is not the highest recorded consumption we've had in this test, because we've done some crazy tests when it's been like minus 20, minus 25 degrees Celsius. We've had snow covered roads, and yeah, under those conditions we've had as high or even higher. But during the summer, even though we had, you know, pretty bad summer conditions, and you may not even call this summer conditions because this is not even going to go in the summer chart, this is going to go in like mild weather chart because of the cold weather. Even, you know, when you're considering that, we haven't had a car close to this high consumption, which is pretty crazy. But okay, I digress, guys. That's, you know, because of this car being the least efficient EV, and it, you know, basically being, you know, a design that irks back to the 1970s. Yes, I know this has been updated, this platform, but it's basically a car with 1970s design and philosophy, right? So when we do the calculations, this car has a usable battery capacity of 116 kilowatt hours. We divide that by the consumption, and then we subtract 3% for heat and discharging losses. That gives the Mercedes G580 a range under today's conditions, going 120 kilometers an hour, of 289 kilometers, which is hysterically low. That is actually hilarious. I mean, that is just funny how little range this car has. But if you want to see how this car performs at 100 kilometers an hour and also 80 kilometers an hour, I'm going to link my Norwegian channel down below. So I'd ask you guys to go there and subscribe to that channel, because views on that channel gives me more access to cars here in Norway and to launches. And it's just going to help the content both ways. So go to that channel. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers on that channel by the end of the year. So guys, let me know what you think of the results of this, the G580. I think it's kind of funny. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later, and goodbye.